Next, we will show you how to update and edit the front page of the landing website. First, we will log in and we will simply go to the top right and select South City. Please note we will open this in a new tab to save time. As you can see, the page is loaded, and at the top we have an option to edit with Elementor. Again, I will right click and open this in a new tab. I will just move my tab across, so the tab on the left has our back end and the tab on the right has our front end. Now that the page is loaded, we will use our mouse cursor to navigate around the page. As you can see by moving the mouse cursor around, there are different sections that are highlighted. First, we will start off with the main section. Using our mouse cursor, we will select the 6 dots at the top of the page, and we will select Edit Section. As you can see, a new window has appeared on the left-hand side, and by default it has taken us to the layout. Here we can choose whether we wish to stretch the section or not. We can choose the content width, and as you can see in this case it is boxed, but we are able to change it to full width. We will set that back to boxed, and as you can see there is a slider underneath that we can also use to change the width. We will set that back to default, and moving on we can change the column's gap sizing. Here we can choose to extend it to narrow, extend it wide or wider. We will leave this as no gap and move on to the height. Here we can choose the height of the section. We can fit to screen, or we can choose a minimum height as well as our default. Next, in our vertical alignment, as you can see we currently have this set to the middle. Next is the overflow, which we will leave as default. Moving on to the parallax, that is an add-on which you will not need to worry about. Again with the particles. Lastly, in the structure, you can see that we currently have this section set to 100%, meaning that there is only one column in the section. Moving on to the styling section, here we can choose a background. As you can see, we currently have a background, which is a nice image of the school. By hovering over it, we can choose to remove the image, or by clicking the image, we can choose a new image. By clicking the image, a new window appears, and here we can choose to upload a new image from our computer, or we can go to our media library where all the images are stored, and we can choose an image. For example, I can choose this image, and it will be highlighted with a blue box. Next, I will select Insert Media, and you will see the image has changed. I will now set that back to its default image, and we will move on. Scrolling down, we can change the position of the image. Here we can choose to see how the image will sit, but for the time being we will leave it as center. Next, we can choose the attachment, whether we want it to scroll or whether we want it to stay fixed with the page. We will set that back to default, and here we can choose to repeat the image. As you can see, the image is quite large and it is not repeating. We will set that back to default, and we can choose the size of the image. As you can see here, we currently have it set to cover. By selecting Auto, you'll see the image size change, as well as Contain. We will set that back to cover, and we will move on. Next, we have our scrolling effects, which we can add to the image. We can select the little edit icon, and as you can see, there is a vertical scroll that appeared with it. We will set that back to default, and we can also add a horizontal scroll. Moving forward, we will deselect our scrolling effects, and we'll move on to mouse effects. Here we can add a mouse track, as you can see here. We will set that back to default, and we will move forward. Next, for the background, we can choose to have a hover image. By selecting hover, you will see that all the options will change. Here we can choose classic, and we can, for example, add a color. Now, my apologies, we will choose red. Now when we hover over it, the image should turn red. However, it is contradicting with our image in the normal. I will now set that back to default. And as you can see, we can also set an image. By selecting a new image, we can insert the media, and you can see it has changed. When we hover over the image, it will change. I will remove that image as we only want one. Next, in the background overlay, we can add an overlay to the background. By selecting Classic, we can choose to add a color overlay, which we can change the transparency below, or we can set that back to default, and we can choose an image as an overlay. For example, I will use the bus image, and as you can see, there is a slight overlay of the bus. Again, you can change the repeatment of this image, the size of the image, the attachment options, as well as the position of the image. Next, we can also change the transparency of this image, making it darker or lighter. I will remove that, and I will set it back to default. Next, we can add a border to the section. Here we will select our border type, in this case solid, and as you can see, a black border has appeared around this entire section. Here we can choose to change the width of the border, the color of the border, as well as the border radius. The border radius will be the edges. As you can see there, it is curved. If we increase this number, the curving will increase. If we decrease the number, the curving will go away. Again, we can add a border that only appears once we hover over the section. Next, we can add a shape divider. As you can see, we are currently selected at the top, and the type is none. We will select mountains, and as you can see, a mountain shape divider has appeared. Here we can continue to change the color, the width, the height. We can flip it, or even bring to the front. We will select this back to default, and we can do the same for the bottom by adding a nice shape divider. Lastly, in the typography setting, here we can change the heading, text, link, and that all of this color. Please note that we will do this in another section, and you will not really need to use this tab. Lastly, in the advanced section, we come to the margin and the padding. The margin is all the spacing outside of the section, whereas the padding is the spacing inside. So as you can see, we currently have a padding of 200 set to the top and the bottom. That will be this space in between this border and the content inside. If I change the top padding to 100, this space should half. As you can see, I've changed it and the spacing has gone down. So the top spacing is now half that of the bottom. We'll set that back to 200 and we will continue. Here we can add motion effects to the entire section. Again, just by selecting Enable, we can choose which effects we want to add. We can add a blur effect and so forth. We can also add an entrance animation, so we can fade in from down. We can also change the responsiveness or hide it on certain visibility screens. Please note that this is more for in-depth development and you will not require this. The same goes for the attributes and the custom CSS. Once we are happy with all the changes we have made, we can simply scroll to the bottom of the page and hit Update. That will save all the changes that you have currently made. But we're not done. Next, we're going to move from a section to a column. In this case, you can see that the column, as highlighted there, is indicated by a dotted black border. By selecting the Edit Column button, again we will see the window on the left-hand side appear. Here, we have the same options as before. We can change our layout, and in the styling section we can change the background. Please note that since we are working with the column, all the changes will only be made to this column and nothing else. For example, we can add a background color, and as you can see, it has only filled in the column that we are working with. We'll set that back to default, and the same goes for an image. You can choose an image, and it will only apply to that column that we are working with. Again, all of these settings are the same as the section, except that it works for the column and not the entire section. Lastly, in the advanced, again we have our margin and padding, which as you can see there are no values set for this, as it is sitting nicely. Moving on from the column, we are now going to edit a widget. Again, moving our mouse cursor around, we will see that we have highlighted a blue section. This widget is called an inner section. If we select the edit icon, the window on the left will appear. As you can see in this inner section, we have currently divided it into two columns. So in this case, we have a section with a column inside it, with an inner section inside that containing two more columns. So again, we will select the widget we wish to edit, and the window will appear on the left hand side. Again, we can change all our layout settings. We can change our styling sections, which let me show you the background so you can see which area we are editing. It applies to that whole widget. As you can see, it has not gone to this top section, as that is the column and not the widget. We'll clear that, and we will move on. From this widget, we can move down to the next column. Again, we will select the edit button, and we have all the options on the left hand side. Next, we will go on to another widget. Moving our cursor again, we have now selected the image, which hovering over we can see as an image widget. We will select the edit icon, and we will have the window on the left. As you can see here, we currently have an image chosen. We have the size of the image. We can change the alignment. We can add a caption to the image, as well as add a link. In this case, you can see we have a custom link set in here, and it is currently taking us to the church site. In the styling section, we can change the width of the image, as well as the max width of the image. I will set that back to default, and we will move forward. Next, we can change the opacity, which is the transparency of the image. We will set that back to default, and we can also change that for the hover effects. So once we hover over the image, it goes transparent. Moving on, we can again add a border. Please note that again, since we are working with the image, the border will apply only to that image. As you can see, we can choose the size of the border, color, and all of that. I will set that back to default, and we will continue. Again, in the advanced section, we have a margin and padding and so forth. As you can see, there's nothing entered here, and this image is sitting nicely. Lastly, we will go to the next widget. Hovering over it, we can see that this is a heading. By selecting the edit button, the window on the left hand side will appear. Here we can add our text, which we can see reflects live. I will remove those full stops. Moving forward, you can see we have a link as well on the heading, which takes us to the church site as well. We can change the size, the tag, and the alignment of this text. Next, in the styling section, we can choose the text color and change it to whichever color we desire. And in the typography section, we can choose the font, which as you can see is default, but we can change it to any font that is available. We can also change the size of the text, the weight of the text. As you can see there, it has gone a little thinner, as well as transform the text to uppercase, lowercase, change the styling. We can add decoration, we can underline it and so forth. We can change the line height, as well as the letter spacing. Once we are happy with our changes, we will simply select here. I will revert this back to default, and we will continue. Next, we have a text shadow. This adds a shadow to the text, as you can see below. As you can see, the shadow has appeared there. I will set that back to default, and we will run through it. So we have our section. Inside our section we have our columns, and inside our columns we have our various widgets. Once we are happy with all the changes made, we will simply select update, and the changes will be saved.